So, when there's the presence of moon contact with Pluto, this is a very enduring bond that can be felt like an immense experience of healing, an immense experience that brings you closer to what fundamentally proper healing, when we usually consider that concept, is all about. Meaning that this is a contact that is formed, that into its highest intends for both individuals participating in this contact to have an immense spiritual and emotional transformation and rebirth, of course, from it. Now, the in the same line that it exists this very huge positive impact, making again both with this contact, having the chance of becoming more conscious and better, let's say, human beings. The potential for good is as strong as the potential for wrong in a way that it can be felt as quite destructive, as well as all um, Pluto contacts have that tendency, or that possibility, that risk in it. But Moon Pluto, for me, it feels and it seems as one of the most all or nothing kind of um, dynamics going on, because of the nature of what we're dealing here with. The moon is a very sensitive and receptive energy within us all. It's where a lot of our memory, our conditioning, our heritage, let's say, it's stored. It's our, in a way, it's considered to be the display, or it has this function of expression of our hearts. And it's a planet that it's very, again, sensitive and tuned into the depths of one's being. And then as we look at Pluto, it has some similarities, actually, in my opinion, with the moon, but is more of a controlling, forceful dynamic. Hence, the moon is more passive, reflective, and internalized. So, when you have such deep parts, archetypes here being displayed, contacting with each other, it's very safe to translate that one of the manifestations of this contact is that both feel very deeply, very, very deeply, and the attachment element of all the Pluto contacts, um, in my opinion, is one of the most, it's the strongest ones, and it can be really, really, really hard to break, um, even when you want to. Because also both represent unconscious, almost like, places that are hidden, that are secretive, that are not, visible and displayed. As on the contrary, as I mentioned in the Sun Pluto video. So it takes a long time for those in this connection to really get really what they're dealing with, because in the initial stage there might be, and usually there is, this very intriguing attraction, and it's one that sometimes is shown in relationships where, again, consciously it might be a little bit hard to define why exactly you are so into someone, or you are so emotionally connected with that individual, because sometimes there's the presence of strong apparent differences, and we'll go there, but usually there's something that in this connection would justify the connection actually to not exist, but somehow the emotional interest and attraction happens because the moon and Pluto, it's what's again beneath the surface. Both represent archetypes that are really about the inner stuff. So, what those two are really attracted to at the core level is who they are internally. The Pluto energy looks at the moon and the very feminine qualities that are being displayed from this individual are very, 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 very attractive. Everything about their their style, the way they do things, the subtle things, right? The meaning behind their words, their thoughts, their intentions, the stairs. They're very interested in what the moon does and how the moon operates unconsciously. Again, things we do that are habitual patterns that we're not really thinking. That we're not. It's not an action that it's planned or premeditated. It's something that we do naturally. It's about us, our essence. So the Pluto looks with immense fascination usually towards aspects of the moon that are very it's like it is as if the Pluto energy can see um, and usually actually there's that capacity for each other, but I feel like initially it's more upon the Pluto until the moon awakens. There's different. Actually, this is a bond where there's different stages. Um, that might, then it's like as I said, an all or nothing. When I say all or nothing, is a way where um, it's a very because the moon is also about moods and it's very changeable. It's not stable energy, so there usually comes a period of time in this connection where the game changes and uh, the moon awakens to the realization of um, truly what they are dealing with or parts of themselves they didn't had let's say got in contact with so far that again kind of expresses into understanding why this bond and this connection and all that story encompasses are is happening. And but initially, again, the Pluto person has a way to get into kind of decoding, let's say, what the moon is really about. So this creates danger depending on who is the person acting behind the Pluto archetype. This usually has, again, the potential for Pluto to be a very supportive, um, very supportive element and energy in the in as a presence, yes, in the moon's person's process and life. It can be very supportive. The presence of Pluto with moon helps again the moon awaken to it's like almost awakening the moon to their own you know I want to say their own ancestral power or some aspect of them that's way beyond, let's say, it's not something, it's sometimes it's something that the moon has been born with but has never tasted from its own being. And I say and I talk about moon representative as feminine energy, but of course the moon here can be experienced by a male entity. So when I talk about the female energy of the moon is about what it represents in terms of our yin energy that exists as well, of course, in male energy. So you can be a male functioning as Pluto, dealing with a female as being the Pluto person. So uh, Pluto's energy can be very assistance of quite important assistance to the development and growth and evolution of Moon person. Even it can be felt again as one of the most, let's say, important um, person or people or presence in their lives. Usually is somehow reported that way, even if the relationship didn't go well. There is a strong element of importance that stands out this contact with Moon Pluto, um, that kind of puts it, into very high level in terms of, again, the agent of change and transformation that it brings. Um, and it has the potential to be very supportive, of course, it has the potential to be very destructive and very, you know, it's something that it's even hard to describe because again, as the Pluto is able to pierce through the moon and see what they're really about, they can use that knowledge. And usually Pluto is not going to openly disclose this. I know you. I know all about you. Let me show you who you really are. Let me show you your real potential. Pluto is very rarely an open, direct, um, expressive about what he's truly feeling, fearing, thinking, wanting, right? Usually it's hidden. So there's a lot of chances of the Pluto energy as well subtly manipulating the moon into this connection to make it be in a position for Pluto that Pluto considers, safe, or what they really want out of this person, or whatever is, again, the agenda behind Pluto. Pluto drive towards the moon. Now, it really depends again on the individuals and where you are and how you easily or not so easily deal with the stuff. Of course, they're talking about generations. I have seen the generation Pluto in Libra and Pluto in Scorpio having contacts with those two primarily. Also, some of generation of Pluto in Virgo, but with the generation of Pluto in Virgo, I have not experienced the exact contact with Moon Pluto. I have not seen it. I have seen it and felt it actually with Pluto in Libra generation, as my Moon is in Libra, my Venus is in Libra, my Mercury is in Libra. So the people from Pluto in Libra generation, and again my Moon, and the way I personally, because it's my personal planets, identify, there's this interesting, let's say, connection and bond that it's formed. So as the Pluto in Scorpio generation, being that I'm a Pluto in Scorpio generation and I have crossed paths with people with Moon in Scorpio, contacting as well my Pluto. So I have been in both ends, being the personal, let's say, planet, and the Pluto as well, individual. And it's actually very interesting because I feel like there's a lot of, as I said in the first video, I believe I've made this notion that usually the Pluto person has more power over the situation, and he feels things a little bit different from the other personal planets, let's say, expression of or side of things. And in some ways, the facets of how the angles that are being displayed and explored are different, but the let's say the main reason, or the base, the foundation from which to begin with, let's say this contact was formed, is the same for both. That's my opinion, for coming from the experience and the observation I've had. And the thing is, Pluto is a much more controlling, distant aspect of ourselves. It's something much more, um, you know, even unknown to our own selves. So it takes longer, most of the times, due to the level of resistance and fear and trauma associated with dealing with such, again, depths that we hold. It takes longer to get to certain realizations that, as for example, the moon or the Mercury or the Venus person, because this is a very, not so much the moon, but even though the moon represents an unconscious aspect of us, but it's an energy that is very, active in our day-to-day lives. We are always operating in functions of the moon somehow. We need to stop and align, and we can get into the moon. We can feel situations out, as Pluto is a little bit different. So it's not as actively present. We need to dig it up. That's why Scorpio and Pluto, um, Scorpio and Pluto and eighth house stuff is all about digging, and it's not something that we usually do willingly. It's something that, it makes us cringe, and it makes us really not want to go there unless we are forced to save ourselves, to figure something out, to find some sort, again, of breakthrough from all the pain and, extremes of feelings and sensations that we can get, especially with this contact as well. That's another aspect of it. I'm a little bit all over the place, but I hope I can, because there's so much that can be said with this contact. This is one of those with Pluto that most fascinate me. There's so much that can be said. Maybe I'll make a two-part video. We'll see. But I feel like, another aspect that is very important of it. It's the digging aspect, exactly as I was talking about. But this is about, again, excavating and really diving again into the depths of someone's, being. There's a lot of psychological and emotional purge that usually happens and needs to happen until that transformative process where you can be maybe more present and at peace with yourself, and so in the contact, in the relationship, can happen. There's a lot of ups and downs and emotional crises. Usually they're very complex and very, almost disturbing as well to deal with this contact, because it shakes us, up and touches us so deeply that it can really throw us out of our center. Usually the moon person, can, have a period of the dark moon phase, let's say, especially if there is a withdrawal. So if there is a separation or a betrayal or some aspect that hinders or breaks or tries to break, let's say it more, put it that way, that breaks here, uh, the relationship, not the bond, the relationship. This can be has a feeling of, or an experience that can be felt as being something quite, traumatic, um, because, when that cut, let's say, is done, again, first of all, it's felt very deeply. And those are two also parts of us, that really do not like to let go, and do not like to forget, and they don't want to. That's another funny thing here, is that moon, Saturn, and, Pluto are about resistance in a way. The more, active expression of that would be resilience. But there's this very stubborn element about really this very fixed force here that combines this contact into really having a hard time letting go. Is it as if you are conscious that you need to or you want to, but there's again this subconscious, very you know, unwilling experience inside of you that does not let you, that it does create that belief and that notion that you can't. It takes some time to figure out here this enigma and this puzzle of Moon Pluto contact, I have to say. Of course, depending as well on um, depending on, as well in elements of your own, again, personality and who you are as an individual. I have understood and felt that for, of course, the Scorpio generation dealing with this, it's a little bit and of course I was talking about conjunctions because um, primarily that's what I have felt, but you also have oppositions and squares and in conjunctions that are all relevant. But I feel that Pluto in Scorpio generation is more familiar with those, let's say it's more naturally gifted, let's say, to deal in the best way if they want to with um, all this emotional tornado um, that this contact can bring. As I found that it was easier to deal with that Scorpio energy than it was for the Libra energy. Maybe because of, again, Pluto in Scorpio is at home. And Libra, it's a more airy type of influence. So attachment and all of this deep emotional dive into some very obscure places and dealing with all this crisis is not really what Libra naturally wants to go towards. It's more, I felt more challenging to be in the Libra aspect of it for both parties, not just on my case, than when dealing with the Scorpio element. And of course, that if you are a very Uranian person, if you have a lot of Aquarius or a lot of even fire, a lot of Mars, a lot of Aries, a lot of Sagittarius as well, and air, but most particular from air, air to be the ones that usually has some sense of um, real deep. It's like how you call it, that feeling of being like claustrophobia feel, because air's a very liberating element. It's something that touches a lot of that freedom concept, and Pluto gives a lot of that feeling, and Pluto relationship kind of gives us that feeling of not being free, of not being able to just move from one relationship to the next one as nothing has happened, as being cleared, or feeling like there's this period of mourning of, let's say, a proper period of mourning of a certain relationship or a certain difficulty found in any other aspect, and then moving to the next one, because that's the natural elements of life, right? We go through the process, we end it, and then we move on. Especially Libra energy that has a lot of that need to keep, contacting and partnering up and connecting, branching out the connection to get to know themselves through that reflective mirror kind of work. So let's say that for air and fire, this is something that might be a little bit tricky to go through. Um, but aside of it, this I'm talking more in a general form now. But let's go back to Moon and Pluto itself. Um, this is a connection that has a lot of potential, a lot of potential. This can be the type of story or special bond that, again, it's not comparable to any other, and it creates a very enduring presence, a very enduring presence in your life. It can be the love of your life. It can be felt like the most amazing intimate connection as well that you ever had. The sexual element here in this context is also one of the most, let's say, desirable ones, because of the nature, again, that those two also represent. So the moon receives Pluto. The moon is receptive. The moon has also a lot of connotation as well with our, our, let's say, our capability, our fertility, right? Our fertility, our libido, our ability to generate life. It receives from sources. So it's receiving from Pluto a very sexual charged dynamic, because Pluto is about complete, again, fusion with another. So, and the moon doesn't have a lot of resistance to that Pluto energy. So it's kind of a very, very intimate bond, again, that it's also formed sexually and actually can create a lot of sexual as well attachment to it. And what happens is that, again, this creates such a degree of intimacy and such a degree of power in the sexual aspect and expression of these two that it's beyond sex. It's beyond the physical aspect of sex. There's a real sense of also healing and transformation, and a lot of knowledge being and life being generated between these two from the sexual combined element that they can create. This is a very hot aspect, let's say. It's something that usually carries, again, a lot of, and very instinctual. It's something that, again, um, it's a very natural, like, let's say, usually sexual and emotional compatibility. Now, the problem is that if we would be in relationships just operating fully from heart, fully from that, again, sense of click between two parts of us that are so about that are so about the soul, that are so about love, the world would be, in a very good place right now. The problem is that happens, and that experience usually is amazing for both, and then it's so amazing and it's so intense and it's so intriguing that all your fears start kind of creeping out and damaging this very precious light that exists initially. So I'm going to end it here because I'm already almost 30 minutes into the video, and probably I will make a second one to continue in any other aspects that most likely I will remind myself that I didn't touch. So I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments below if you have had any experience with this Moon Pluto context and what you would like to see more discussed about as well in terms of those dynamics.